This video proudly brought to you by the fine people at Housemade Industrial. What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the OG Frenchie messing around in his lawnmower shed, making stuff. What are we making? We are still making the Persian fighter. And in last week's episode, we worked on the tang and the guard. This week, we're going to be continuing the work a little bit on the guard. Also, we're going to be cutting out the handle profile. That way we can get all of the components of the knife at least somewhat prepared. And then in this week's time, I'm going to be working on kind of fine-tuning the profile some, making sure it's comfortable in the hand, that sort of thing. Also, we'll be turning our attention back to this guard a little bit, trying to get an idea of what this is going to look like when it's done. I will tell you, one of the hardest things for me in knife making is sculpting things, handles even, especially guards, and in a 3-dimension. I mean, you literally have to be like a sculptor. You have to see a block of mild steel and remove everything that isn't the guard, and that's just hard. My brain has a hard time wrapping that idea around itself, around the brain.
I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. Anyway.
So that's kind of the name of the game, is seeing what you want to create before it's created. And it's always been a struggle for me, but I think the more that I do it, the better I get, I guess. And that is the whole point of doing this build, is to get better. I will definitely be getting better because this is challenging. And when you push yourself, you develop new techniques and you gain a little bit more confidence each time. That's really important in making knives. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on into this thing. We're going to start with getting the handle cut out. Alright, so now that we have the face of this cut, what I've done is just traced out the tang. And a really easy way to do that is just to simply put the block down. And I even like to use the cutoff piece as kind of like a shim just to hold the knife up. And that way you don't have to sit there and press it with your hand, but you just kind of use it as a resting point or whatever. And we're going to line all this up and then trace out the tang. And we're going to do this making sure that the profile looks right, if that makes sense, you know, just lining everything up, which it does. So now that I've done that, the next step is going to be to mark out this tang on the front side so we can see exactly where we're going to be drilling this. A really easy way to do that is to use a scribe. I happen to have the calipers here, and this is an old pair that it does not accurately measure anymore. So I just use them for scribing. Also, too, on that note, if you guys use cheap calipers like I do, these do not last forever. They will become wildly inaccurate with moderate use. So it's always a good idea to go ahead and just try to measure something that you know the actual width of, just to make sure that they're still working correctly. Anyway, we're just using them for a scribe, so this will work for this purpose. So there's multiple ways to line this up in scribe. I'm just going to use the back side of this block because I know it's flat. And you can see I'm lining up this first mark of the tang. And then we'll go ahead and scribe where that mark is. And it's kind of hard to see, but I can see it. We'll go ahead and hit it a few more times. Just gonna scratch it deep for a second so we can see it. So we know it's that one there. And then we'll do the same thing with this bottom line. We'll go ahead and bring it to the front, find where that bottom line is, and tighten it back out and scribe the bottom line. And this is a really easy way to be able to mark out where the tang is going. Once you get them scribed, we're just going to make it even a little bit easier. We use this ruler here to draw the pencil line, and that way we'll be able to see it a little better. So there's that line, and we'll go ahead and do the bottom one. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about there. It just transfers the pattern to the front so that you can see where you need to be drilling. There we go. So now we have the width of the tang. The next step is going to be marking out center and then, you know, widening out on each side of that center line for the place we're going to drill. So let's go ahead and we'll do that real quick. This is 1 1/4 wide, so we're looking at 5/8 of an inch for center. Which would be here. Nope, it'd be right here. And we'll go ahead and make sure that's correct. Yep. So now that we know where the center is, you could also do this with the calipers as well and scribe a line. But for our purposes, I think just doing it this way will be fine. So we know our drill holes are going to go right in the center of this line. And because we have this large guard, I'm not really worried about drilling too much wood away. Even if we drill quite a bit more, we're going to have this guard that's going to hide all that. So I'll just go ahead and call that good, and we'll use this line as our line to drill through. Let's head over to the drill press and I'll show you how I'm going to try to tackle drilling this tang that is clearly not straight up and down. Okay, so here is the idea for drilling this out. I have found a block of wood that is nice and squared up, and I've made sure to check all these sides. That way we know that no matter how we sit it on there, this will be our point of being square. And then we've basically just clamped our handle material to the piece of wood. And that way when we go to drill this, we'll be able to line it up to go in kind of at this angle. Now my idea here is just to drill the center, and then I might change the angle and drill one just here, and same for here, and then we'll just have to dig out the bottom. And that's a really good way to do this. It's really hard to hold this block of wood in your hand in hopes that you can just keep it steady as it's going. So I like to clamp it to something that I know is nice and square, and that way I can, you know, visually line it up. If this is the drill bit, before I start drilling, I'll make sure that, you know, I have the piece right where I want it before I go ahead and start drilling, if that makes sense. So that's what we've done. Let's go over and we'll drill out this first hole. Here we are over at the drill press, and you can see I'm using a pretty long drill bit here, and that's just to help get the depth that we're shooting for. I also am speeding this clip up because it really takes a long time to get this hole started. You can see I'm trying to kind of grab the drill bit with my thumb, and I don't really advise this. This drill bit happens to be nice and smooth towards the top, so I'm able to do that. But the reason I'm doing that is to keep the drill bit straight as we start this hole. And the reason is because we're trying to drill at an angle. It's not a flat surface. So the drill bit is wanting to kind of wander off to the low side of the slope. And just taking your time to get it started is the name of the game. Because if you just rush through it and push hard, the drill bit will wander a little bit, and then your hole's going to be off. So that's really all I'm trying to show here, is that you have to just take your time and make sure that you get the hole started before drilling out the hole. Now that we have the initial holes drilled in the block of wood, we've got a good starting spot here. Once you get to this step, it's a matter of fine-tuning the hole and continuing to remove the debris down there. You can see there's more to get out yet. You really only have a few options for tools to get down in here and remove the material. You've got standard drill bits like we were just using. You have a plethora of hand files and little tiny files. And since we're making this knife for the Hidden Tang Challenge, I felt like this was relevant to what we're doing. So you're really left with this idea of having to figure out a way to remove the material. A little trick that I came up with is using one of these. This is like a hacksaw blade or a sawzall blade, and I've just cut the top of it and removed a lot of this material so that it could be nice and skinny. And that way you can get in here and continue to cut and remove some of this material. Now they make something called a broach, and that is essentially like this. It just has a sharp pick at the end to be able to get in here and scrape away the material. So that works really well. But if you're like me and you don't want to buy one, something like this kind of does the same thing. And if you have an extra blade here laying around the shop, you can trim it down and thin it out to be able to kind of work in the same fashion. So we'll just go ahead and fast forward to this thing fitting onto the Tang. Voila! We have a good looking fit there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut this heel block. We're going to just trim off this little side right here right fast, just like that right there. All right? Okay now. All right then. Definitely a lot of pink and red in the center of this block. It's going to be really interesting to see what it looks like when it's done, because, you know, on the outside it looks completely different than the inside. That's what's really cool about cutting into these blocks, is you never know what it gonna be looking like when it's done. Kinda start to see the dude take some shape. So we definitely have a swooped down profile for the handle, which I absolutely love. I have not really made one like this yet, and I think it's going to be pretty cool. Let's go ahead and finish cutting out the rest of this block, and then we'll move on to the next step. After hanging out in a live stream and getting the suggestion from Eric to fix this in a different way than I was going to fix it, I think I'm going to try it. So I was talking with him, and we were talking about this little bit of a gap here that you can see for the slot. And my original idea was to take this out, weld just a little bit up here, and refile it. And I do think that that would work. However, I am wanting to try his suggestion. He suggested to take it out to the anvil, get a ball peen hammer, and start lightly tapping around the side here. And what that should do is it should take this metal and expand it in all directions, mainly this way is what I'm hoping, and that should widen the metal enough to close that gap. So if it works, then you'll know that it works. And if it doesn't work, then you'll know that I don't know how to do it right. But either way, this is a learning experience, so let's go learn together. Let's go over to the anvil and give this a try. Now, lucky for me, there's only a little bit of snow on the anvil, thanks to my French hillbilly roof over top of this. I'm going to start, like I said, hammering on the top of this right next to the material that we want to pinch. Now, before we get too carried away, let me go grab the knife and we'll see where we're at. All right, so there's our piece that fit in there a second ago. And looky there, it ain't fitting. And do you want to know why? It's because the material is starting to close up. We've got the guard back on here, and that is about as far as it's gonna go. So I'm thinking, might just hammer it on and see if we can get it back down to the back of the ricasso. And looky there, the gap is gone. And just like that, there we go. What a cool little trick that was. Really appreciate it, my dude. And goes to show that the people in the knife making community are pretty cool. Definitely awesome that people like to help out, share tips, and just help one another. Pretty cool. All right, so after just a few more minutes cleaning those dimples back up, we are looking solid. What a cool little trick that was. Definitely easier than taking the knife out and welding and filing. So that worked like a charm. It looks fantastic, and we're ready to move on. So after spending a few minutes with the filing some of this away, we're left with a little bit of a pattern up here, which looks pretty cool. Now, like I said in the beginning, I am not great at sculpting or filing. I have zero experience doing this. However, I will say that as I'm going, you know, I'm just picking a couple of spots randomly to start filing. And so far, it's looking pretty cool. So I would say that my experience so far is you just got to jump into it. You know, to be fair, I didn't really have a plan when I went into this. I just drew a couple lines and said, hey, I'll file that and see what it looks like. And now we know what it looks like. But before I did this, I wasn't really sure what it was going to look like. Anyway, I'm saying all that to say that don't be afraid to try new things, because this is pretty cool. And it's something that's super simple to do, and it just adds a little bit of a decorative touch. You can see here on the file, we have all of the metal shavings that we're removing. I have this file card down here. I think that's what these are called. Anyway, I just do a few passes, and then with all the metal shavings on the corner that we're using to cut, just kind of take it and run it, and then it kind of clears off the file, which is really nice. So I've just been doing that every few minutes, and definitely a cool little trick and tip. These are pretty inexpensive, and you can find them on Amazon and such. And they work really well to clean off your files and keep them cutting. Another cool thing about this is I had planned to etch this guard. I was thinking of maybe smoothing it all out and then acid etching it to make it look black-ish. And, you know, I was thinking, okay, maybe I do that. But now that I've decided to start filing, we can use these divots to our advantage when it comes to acid etching. You know, we might be able to etch it and then go ahead and sand it, and then just these lines would be black. Or, you know, vice versa. We could etch the whole thing and then file out these marks and they would be silver. So, you know, there's multiple ways to do it. I think that trying new stuff like this is going to up your game. It's certainly going to make the knife look a little cooler and a little more detailed, and it's really quite easy to do. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just keep rolling on this back side here, and then we'll flip it over and get this one done, and then we'll get an idea of kind of what we've got so far. Well, there you have it. One more week in the books working on the Persian Fighter. And I gotta say, it's really starting to take shape here. And just looking at it right now, currently in its condition, gives me energy and motivation to continue working on this thing, because it looks wicked cool. Absolutely. We got the handle cut out and got it roughly shaped to the profile in this dimension, which is cool. We also spent some time working on fixing the tang slot. As you can see there, it worked fantastically. No more gaps on there. Huge shout out to Eric at the Rivers Experience for that tip. Absolutely awesome. I really like that about the YouTube community and knife makers in general. They're always eager to share their trips. They're always eager to share their tips and tricks. Unlike magicians, you always want to know, how did the magician pull the card out of his butt crack? Maybe the answer is he walked into the room with the card already put into his butt crack. Could be. Anyway, got off topic there for a second. That happens. It just does. Chasing squirrels, cleaning little spots and such. It happens to me quite a bit. Anyway, the ADD did not get the best of me this week because I did indeed get some stuff done. So there you have it. We also worked on the guard some and filing that. Even though I only did a few cuts, you know, on the end, it definitely adds some character. I think as far as next week goes, I will continue with this idea of putting some flair on the guard with the files. Really like that idea. It's not something that I've really done before, and I think when it's all said and done, it's going to add that little extra pop to the knife, right? Like, ooh, kind of catch it in the light. Like, ooh, that looks pretty cool. Anyhow, really appreciate you guys hanging out for this week. It really means a lot. I really do appreciate it. And I hope that you found some value in this video, whether it was you being entertained or you learning something. Either way is good with me. That's why I like to do it, to continue to give back to the other people who are interested in knife making, because it's a fun hobby. I also like it for the fact of documenting my journey. I started this craft 2 years ago, making some pretty fugly knives. And today, I am slightly better. So, yeah, the journey's slow, but I'm getting there. And I think pushing myself past my comfort zone each time I make a blade, trying something that I've always wanted to try, or trying a different technique, it's only making me better. So, there you have it. Anyway, like I said, really appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for sticking to the end. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode, where we're going to continue working on the Persian Fighter. I am stoked. I hope you guys are too. We'll see you there.